Thanks, Vicki. And again, Cheryl Oldham, Vice President for Education and Workforce at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. Really thrilled to be here with you all today and with this fantastic panel. I'm going to moderate, but just start out with a few sort of overarching comments about career technical education, why the Chamber is engaged and what we're doing and why we're involved. I think, it's interesting. I had in a previous life, spent some time at the U.S. Department of Education and working in the higher education space. And we, I think over the last maybe decade or so, we have had a great focus in this nation on college completion and college, moving from not just access to college, but completion at the college level, and very much a focus on what felt like four-year, degrees for everyone. And I've definitely sensed this shift maybe a little bit away from that now, and as sort of a recognition and an acknowledgement that four-year degrees are not necessarily the answer for everyone, and we really and sort of breathing maybe a little new life into this conversation around career and technical education. And so from the Chamber's perspective, we are the largest trade association essentially representing the interest of business in the country. We represent over 3 million business people of all sort of sizes, sectors, regions of the country. And this is, the issue of, do we have an educated and trained workforce to be competitive and successful going forward is certainly the focus of what I do and the team that I work with does at the Chamber. And so CTE is one of those areas that we are focused on from a policy perspective, in the sense that we lobby and we take sort of policy priorities to the Hill, and we really do want to see sort of this focus on reauthorization of Perkins and a focus on quality and innovation when it comes to those programs. So I look forward to sort of telling you a little bit more about some of the other things that we're working on at the Chamber, but I do want to obviously allow these great panelists an opportunity to give a few minutes of overview, introduce themselves, and then I know that Tim and David have some slides to share with everyone. So I think we'll start on the end with Tim.
Well, outstanding. Good afternoon. Feel like we should do some jumping jacks this afternoon. So I have about 240 slides to go through, so I'll try to do it quick. All joking aside, can we throw the PowerPoint up on the screen, please? So I'll go ahead and just get the ball rolling here. Go ahead and go to the next slide there if the clicker doesn't work. So I'm Tim Betcher. I'm the CEO of RealityWorks. Pertinent to this conversation, I also serve on the board of directors for the Association of Career and Technical Education, which is the overarching teachers association for CTE. I also chair the Industry Workforce Needs Council, which is a group of industry or business leaders coming together to help rally industry support for CTE as a whole. Most of the organizations that serve on that group are companies that rely on CTE every day to produce the workforce that they need to remain viable and effective. The last piece that's pertinent is I chair the West Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board. So for those of you that are familiar with workforce boards or WIBs, I'm pretty heavily involved in that. And personally, I like to focus my time on the intersection of education, workforce development, and economic development. And that's where I like to spend my time and energy. A little bit about my company. Since this is an education conference, I thought I'd just share a tiny bit about what we do. My company focuses on hands-on technology. We have programs that really serve career and technical education. I have a series of infant simulators that are used for parenting education, teenage pregnancy prevention, the development of child care workers, and also the development of nurses. I have a series of business education simulators where I can put students in the shoes of a CEO or managing director, allow them to pick their products, set up their sales and marketing channels, the manufacturing programs that they're going to use, and then compete against virtual competitors. We pulled those out of Coca-Cola and KPMG and repurposed them for ed. And then finally is our real career portfolio. And in that I have a welding app that we put together with the American Welding Society. It's a game called Weld Hero that we're developing to get students excited about welding careers. I also have a virtual welding simulator that allows me to cost-effectively train students on welding. And then we also took it a step further and just launched a live welding system where I can basically put an instructor in every welding booth. If you're going to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So career and technical education. As I would describe it, it connects students in a hands-on way to what they're learning. So witnessing complex chemistry in, well, you got to go back 2 slides for me, please. Sorry about that. So writing detailed quarterly business reports, and Career Tech Ed is supported by the Carl D. Perkins Act, which is really designed to build capacity and technical assistance for CTE. And it's all about that industry-relevant training. I always use this little statement when I talk about career tech. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. And I see CTE as the involve me and I learn programs within schools. They're very hands-on, project-based learning, and I feel they're very relevant for schools, or for students, pardon me. As far as the reach for CTE, this is one of the frameworks of the career clusters that are used in career and tech ed, and it encompasses all the business, marketing, finance programs, family consumer science, ag. The numbers that are listed in blue up there are the number of educators that we at RealityWorks see as targets. So there's about 250,000 educators that we see within career and tech ed. As far as the other reach with students, so we got 250,000 educators. About 94% of high school students have some connection to career tech ed, whether that's a course or a career pathway that they're focused on. And there's 12 million post-secondary students in CTE programs in the U.S. every year. One of the big cornerstones for career tech ed is also the numerous secondary to post-secondary partnerships and dual credentialing type programs, which are extremely valuable to both the students and parents for students that are in the CTE courses. As far as support, from my view, CTE is becoming widely supported. So we are seeing a lot of legislative support. You'll see that in most of your states with state and congressional leaders and CTE-type funding programs or CTE-type legislation to support industry connection to programs in schools. We also have started to establish a national CTE legislative caucus, which is designed to keep Perkins in place and strengthen CTE. I think we got about 100 representatives and somewhere around 50 to 20 senators on board with that CTE caucus. Arnie Duncan has been vocal. You'll see that in the statements. And then the industry and trade organization and workforce boards are also very supportive of industry or CTE as a whole. And I do have numerous case studies if you want to see any of those, everything from Siemens apprenticeship programs to the STEM immersion programs to what the rest of the folks up on the list there are supporting. Quick couple of points on research. I thought, one of the things that's interesting is students see great value in CTE programs, and research has shown that 69% of students see these programs as helpful for them getting a job. Employers also express great satisfaction, with 90% of them, 90% of employers showing they were very satisfied with the overall productivity and work quality of students coming out of CTE programs. There's also numerous research studies that look at the ROI at a state level for CTE, and we see these studies continuing to grow. The last point I wanted to make was about CTSOs. CTSOs are the Career Technical Student Organizations, everything from FFA to FCCLA to Skills USA. These organizations are really about developing student leadership. Most of these programs have huge participation. FFA is 600,000 strong, Skills USA is 400,000 strong, and a lot of active engagement with students. So from my view, CTE is growing and disruptive. It's using technology in very meaningful ways. They're very technology oriented to address the major pain points of industry, which I believe gives great credibility. The dual credential programs create great value for students and parents, and the guidance and exploration of career opportunities is also a cornerstone as well. So that's my view on CTE.
Well, my name is Dave Conley. I'm a professor at the University of Oregon, and I'm also the founder and CEO of the Educational Policy Improvement Center, which is devoted to trying to improve the quality of educational policies so that we make better decisions and for better programs in the U.S. Our research over the last 15 years in particular is focused on what it takes to be ready for college and careers. And that may seem like kind of like, well, don't we know already? I mean, don't you just take the right courses in high school and then you're ready for college? Or you go into a voc ed program and you're ready for a career. Well, I mean, kind of that's the historical model, and yet nobody ever really went out and checked what the skills and knowledge were that it would take to be not just eligible, but ready to succeed once you left high school. The really disruptive force right now, or the disruptive element, is the notion that high school graduation is not enough, that students have to be ready to keep learning beyond high school, regardless of the future that they've chosen. The other revolutionary, I think, disruptive force, particularly in secondary schools, is the notion that students don't have to choose a future while they're in school, and more importantly, adults don't have to choose that future for them. That students need to be challenged to high levels and developing a set of foundational skills that enable them to pursue any of a wide range of futures. If we know one thing for certain, it's that the U.S. economy is dynamic and ever-changing, and that none of us can really predict what it's going to be like throughout the entire work span of a person's life after high school. And if I don't know how many of you in the room can think back to when you were in high school, but at lunch we were just talking, a couple of us, about that when young women were in high school, if you were on a college prep course of study, you were not taught typing. You weren't allowed to learn how to type. And that many people sort of who grew up in that generation came out of school maybe without a set of skills that, lo and behold, now you actually need those skills to be successful in a professional setting. So it's not clear that high schools can identify a set of particular technical skills that everyone needs. And it's not clear that one single set of academic knowledge is going to be sufficient, but what is clear is that everyone's going to need a foundational set of learning skills and techniques and capabilities that will allow them to keep learning and adapting throughout their careers. And our research led to the development of a model that looks at, first of all, we look at and think about the levels of readiness around work. And this is not one of the either-or kind of things where either you're going to college or going to work. The idea is everybody goes to some form of learning beyond high school and they go to work. So if you start with the old model, high school diploma was kind of at a level of getting kids ready to go to work, which those are the kinds of things like showing up on time, not being on drugs, not getting in fights with your fellow workers. And in fact, it's an incredibly low level of expectation. And yet, what does the research tell us? That when employers are surveyed, what do they find? That a very significant proportion of applicants do not meet this level. I've seen figures as high as 40% that say their applicant pools not meeting these basic entry to the workforce types of qualifications. So when we're thinking about careers and so forth, we have to start at a much lower level and realize that for a lot of students, it's controlling, it's impulse control. It's basic sort of behavioral elements and issues. Okay, but so let's say that they've done that. What's the next level that they need to reach? Well, occupation ready would be what a lot of CTE types of courses will do. It's what kind of what voc ed was focused on in the past. But occupation here is now at a higher level of knowledge, a higher baseline level, and with a greater ability to process information and use it in what we call conditional ways. In other words, not just in procedural ways where you're following directions, but conditional ways where you have to make decisions about how you use knowledge and skills. The next level then is what we identify as career pathway ready. That's when you now have the academic skills plus the conditional knowledge within a career area that allows you to start on a career pathway. The difference between occupation and career is that occupation could be where a level of employment that you achieve that you retain for your entire life. It could be an entry-level position that you don't move beyond. A career level of preparation means you could move through a pathway. And I mean, one of the most common examples is in the medical field, you can enter any number of different places. You can enter as a med tech or as a paramedic. You can enter as a nurse. You could enter as a health administrator. You can enter in many different ways. And you will find you have career pathways, options to move through medicine if you choose to acquire new knowledge and skills and new certifications. Career pathways almost always involve acquiring certification. And certification almost always involves some level of test and some level, obviously, of training or preparation to take that test. So that's a new part of our economy that simply wasn't there 50 years ago, this incredible emphasis on career pathway preparation and then achievement through one's life of continuing to add knowledge and skills and certifications. Well, then we come to college ready, which is familiar to people in the sense that it means going toward a bachelor's degree, but it really means the ability to succeed in a wide range of courses. That college is not about a major in the US. Some countries around the world, when you're admitted to college, you're really admitted to what we would call a major. And they do what we call college during what is functionally a 13th year of high school. The US model lets people go to college and then figure out what they're going to do. That means that the preparation for college requires a much wider range of foundational academic skills than would be the case if one were simply going to a particular program of study directly from high school. And then finally, you knit all this together, and what teachers always point out when you put this model in front of them is it's not enough just to be able to go to college or to get a job or whatever. You've got to be ready to function in society. And that requires an integrated set of skills and knowledge. So when we put all this together into a model, I organized it into what I call 4 keys. You're going to see a fair amount of detail here. There will not be a test, by the way, so don't worry about it. And if this is a test of anything, it's a vision test. So if you're like me, you need your glasses for it. But I will say it's on our website, and you can download this information at collegecareerready.com or epiconline.org. collegecareerready.com or epiconline.org. So the model starts by saying that everyone needs to think a whole lot more than they do now. They need much more precise thinking skills. In this case, problem formulation, research interpretation, communication, precision, and accuracy are incredibly important skills to be able to gather information, judge it, and then interpret it, and then do something with it. Content knowledge we're all pretty aware of, the know part of this, and yet the missing part of content knowledge is students' orientation to content. Are they motivated to learn it? What kinds of beliefs do they have about their capabilities as a learner? Do they believe in aptitude or effort? These are really incredibly important things to know about learners, and right now all we focus on is did they learn it, not why did they succeed or not succeed as learners of content knowledge, which extends to the next point, which is the key learning skills and techniques, which we call ACT. And in this key of the model, 2 important elements: ownership of learning and learning techniques. Ownership of learning goes by a lot of different names: student agency, engagement, motivation, and others. But what it really means is to what degree do students take control of their learning, and conversely, to what degree are they able to take control of their own learning becomes an increasingly important question. And doing that, there's a whole cycle of behavior. Some of you probably are familiar with Angela Duckworth's work on grit. I use the term persistence, which I take to mean really much more active engagement as opposed to overcoming obstacles. But you can see the elements here. All of this we call kind of metacognitive skills, in the sense that you're managing your own thinking and you're managing your control of the learning process. And we have suggested that we abandon the term non-cognitive, because that implies you're not thinking. And in fact, these skills require more thinking than, in some ways, than learning content knowledge. This requires much more use of executive function. The learning techniques themselves won't be a surprise to you. It's a lot of things that really differentiate a successful learner from an unsuccessful learner. And what's really interesting when we talk about an achievement gap in math and English, we talk all about teaching more content. we don't talk about teaching learning skills and techniques. And we, in fact, have a tremendous gap among learners between those who can manage their time, take notes, prepare for a test, memorize key information, read strategically, collaborate with other learners, and those who don't possess those skills. So this becomes incredibly important when we're talking about closing an achievement gap. And finally, and often overlooked in the US, is the importance of being able to handle transitions from one grade level to the next, one school level to the next, but most importantly and most difficult, from high school to post-secondary education. Probably the single most traumatic transition in most people's lives, particularly if it involves leaving home or moving to an entirely new setting where you're no longer as supported as an individual as you were in school. A lot of components to it, but the short version is to say that we don't really equip young people to prepare for that, and so they engage in this profoundly schizophrenic activity where on the one hand they want to be independent, and on the other hand they do absolutely nothing to prepare for it. They want to, I don't know if any of you have teenagers or had teenagers, but they want absolute independence, but they want you doing their laundry and cooking their food. That's the kind of contradictory behavior that goes with not really preparing for a transition. So lots that goes with that. So think, know, act, go. And the reason I've introduced this and I wanted to share it is the key point about this model is that it applies not only to students going to a baccalaureate program, it applies equally as well to students going on to technical programs, to certificate programs, to the military, to trade schools and training, to any of a wide range of CTE type programs. These are really generalizable skills. And some people would say, well, wait a minute, do you really need all those cognitive strategies? Well, I think that's really one of the, if you're going on into a technical program, and increasingly what we're finding is, yes, those technical programs require a tremendous amount of information processing and a much deeper understanding of material and the ability to apply it. So all of these elements tend to be really important across a range of learning settings, and we haven't really acknowledged that very well. So very quickly then, to make this point, if you take a look at the relationship between college ready and career ready as defined by different groups, my key cognitive strategies overlaps what some of the CTE groups call foundational academic knowledge, which includes in it some very skill-oriented, but also, as I noted before, a lot more technical knowledge. The content knowledge, once again, as defined by the CTE groups, is this foundational content knowledge, which I say is a subset of the fuller range of content knowledge that you'd acquire if you're going on to college. The key learning skills, it's a little bit hard to see, but you'll see this overlaps the occupation-specific technical skills and generic employability skills, which are key, and ways that we think about this in the CTE world overlaps my key learning skills and techniques, not entirely, but a tremendous amount of commonality among them. And then finally, the transition knowledge and skills, I'd say overlap generic employability skills to a significant degree, as well as the occupation-specific technical skills, which require this being able to socialize and acclimate yourself into a workplace. Employers, if you query them, will tell you that new workers struggle not because of a lack of technical skills as much as a lack of human relations skills very often. And it's this inability to move into the culture of an organization successfully that becomes the problem. So the bottom line here is the new era is one where college ready and career ready have significant overlap. We don't need to track kids to different futures. We don't need fundamentally different programs for them. All students are going to benefit from curriculum that applies knowledge and asks them to use it conditionally. And that increasingly what we need is higher and higher quality learning experiences that engage students and cause them to have to demonstrate their deeper understanding of what they're learning and their application of that knowledge towards some sort of a future. That's the disruptive part as far as I'm concerned. It's finding that spot in the middle where everyone benefits from programs that draw upon the best of cognitive psychology and learning theory on how people really understand and process information and retain it, but also does it in a way that points towards a future that's inclusive, where all students can participate and all students can use this as a way to move on in their lives to be successful.
Good afternoon. My name is Arthi Dupelia, and I'm the Chief Officer for College and Career Success at Chicago Public Schools. Over the past 5 years or so, we have actually executed a a significant overhaul of our CTE programs across the district in Chicago, and we've actually seen tremendous improvements in student outcomes as a result, but at the same time we also continue to face significant challenges and have significant needs that perhaps industry can help us with. So I wanted to share my perspectives from that experience on the ground in Chicago. So as a bit of context, CPS is the third largest district in the country, serving 400,000 students across 665 schools. We have about 200 CTE programs across the district, across about 60 high schools, and serving 18,000 students, which is about 20% of our high schoolers. When I arrived in CTE in Chicago in 2009, our programs were being implemented very unevenly. Student outcomes were not strong in terms of industry certifications being earned, work readiness, college enrollment, employment rates, you name it. And our programs really weren't seen as a path toward anything. They were really seen as the dumping ground for our lowest performing students, right? And so despite that, our mayor at the time, who was Richard Daley, and our CEO at the time, who was a fellow named Arnie Duncan, actually saw the shifting labor market landscape and really saw the opportunity that CTE could bring. They really saw it as a disruptive way to transform the educational opportunities available in our district. And so, looking at the vast majority of the jobs in the labor market requiring some kind of second piece of paper, CTE is actually the perfect way to prepare students for post-secondary success because it prepares you for those multiple pathways, whether it's an industry cert or a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or more. So in 2009, we launched a strategy to reinvent CTE and CPS, which we really sought to redefine CTE as a pathway to accelerate student success versus being that dumping ground for low-performing students. And so key components of our strategy included, one, linking our program offerings to where the jobs are, right? So we phased out things of the past like mechanical drafting and keyboarding. We still teach everyone to type, but it's not a 3-year major for people in high school anymore. And now we've shifted to things like Cisco networking and game programming that are the jobs of the 21st century. We upgraded our teacher credential requirements. So we had all these industry certifications we wanted to offer, but in the vast majority of our programs, our teachers didn't actually hold those certifications. And so we raised the bar for all of our teachers, which you can imagine was also quite a professional development exercise to go from keyboarding to game programming. So we went through that process. I think most importantly, I would say, on the ground, we went through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to raise the rigor and relevance of our actual curriculum and assessments. So with respect to our curriculum, it was not tied to any kind of standards, right? We didn't have the Common Career Technical Core back then, and so, even the most old school vocational programs like carpentry were totally different between one school and another, and industry post-secondary partners hadn't been consulted. And so we brought industry advisory councils to table, asked what are the standards we should be teaching toward. Then we backward mapped our curriculum and lab designs from that, with our teachers honestly doing that curriculum writing. I would say at the same time, over the past few years, we've obviously seen the introduction of the Common Core, and so we're also now ensuring that all of our lessons not only incorporate those technical skill standards, but also align to literacy or math Common Core standards. And I'd also want to emphasize that, as we've developed this curriculum, we've shifted our learning to be much more student-led as part of this process. And so you see every program now ending in a capstone project that's sort of a competition-style format where students are applying those technical and metacognitive and academic skills. So it could be a business plan competition or building robots, for example. From an assessment standpoint, we also had no assessments across all of our programs, so there were no objective measures of how our students were doing. So for technical skills, we used CTE course grades, we developed performance tasks, we used industry certifications, and we used NOCTI technical assessments, which you may know are one of the few standardized technical assessments available for CTE programs. We also established, to get at the metacognitive skills, we established an employability skills rubric or assessment in partnership with our local workforce board, where we said, what are the things you can't necessarily get from a written test, but we know from observing students student activity, student behavior and practice, that whether they have those teamwork skills, the verbal communication skills, the resiliency, those kinds of things. And we developed a set of 16 characteristics that teachers now rate students on twice a year. It's created a common language for teachers to rate students and focus their instruction. It's also a tool that our employers now use to evaluate students as they participate in internships. So we're all speaking a common language. I'd say related to this, we also placed a much stronger focus on instructional support, i.e. teacher training. So most of our teachers come straight from industry, and they haven't taught before, so they struggle in their first few years, and in some case, ongoing for a very long time, and they certainly don't know things like how to integrate the Common Core in their lessons. And so we've added instructional coaches. We're working with the Chicago New Teacher Center to really train up our teachers. And the last thing I would say is, obviously, my colleagues have talked about linkages to industry. And so increasing work-based learning and access to jobs is a big part of our work, as well as increasing access to college credit while in high school. And so we have a team focused on business partnership development now, and we also have extensive work going on to align all of our curriculum with our local city colleges so that they all of our programs result in college credit. I think with all of this work underway, we're excited that we're seeing great progress in terms of student outcomes growth when you're looking at certifications being earned, college enrollment, for example, work readiness growth, academic growth. One example I would point to that you might have heard of is we launched 5 early college STEM schools in Chicago a couple years ago, which follow the IBM P-TECH model out of New York. And these are schools where students are following a focused IT career pathway throughout high school, have the opportunity to earn significant college credit and an associate's degree while in high school with the strong partnership we have with our city colleges. And each one of those schools also has a corporate lead partner, IBM, Microsoft, Verizon, you name it. And those partners are really invested in the school, and they're providing mentors. They are providing project-based learning, case studies with students. They are providing students access to be first in line for job interviews upon completion of their associate's degree. So great opportunities. And when you kind of unpack and look in the classroom, you're also seeing students building robots. You're seeing students, programming apps. You're seeing students, building the network infrastructure for a Cisco networking. So I think lots of great things going on. And so what I'd say is, I think one thing we can learn from all of this in the education sector is that CTE done really well is actually really good Common Core instruction, right? So it's competency-based, it's aligned with real-world expectations, it requires students to engage in critical thinking, project-based learning, exercise those metacognitive skills in order to demonstrate mastery. So I think it's a great model for where education should be going. I think with all that being said, the flip side is I wouldn't say that CTE is disruptive in our district in any way. I don't think it's transforming our approach to education, and I think it could down the road, but I think despite these sort of incremental improvements or significant improvements, I don't think they're transformational, and I think that I'd highlight several challenges that we face that get in the way of that transformation. I think one is the point around teacher preparation that I mentioned. We often don't see that quality of instruction, so we need to figure out how to cost effectively really grow our teacher skills. I think second, this curriculum piece. I talked about the work we've done there, and we're proud of it, but it's very laborious and a very imperfect process. And I think the reality is we'd love to have more off-the-shelf curriculum in these CTE pathways that incorporate modern, relevant case studies that we can utilize, sort of plug and play in our programs, and that we're not developing all of that from scratch. I think assessment is also an issue, and I pointed to that. So for technical assessments, we use NOCTI, but we'd love to have more than just end-of-year assessments. We'd love to have quarterly benchmarks, different tools we can use. And for non-cognitive skills, I think everyone laments at how hard that is to measure and how subjective, qualitative that is, but it would be great to see some standardization around that or some tools that people are commonly using to create a common language. I'd also say, everyone's talking about personalized learning, and certainly that's an area that I think is growing, and we'd love to see more of that in CTE courses where it makes sense. And the last piece I'd point to is simply meaningful work-based learning and real employment opportunities at the end of programs, because I think these can really transform the nature of CTE, and it's not easy to convince employers to take a chance on low-income students as interns, especially in a tough economy when they're letting adults go, right? So we in Chicago, I would say, have very few case studies of companies hiring students right out of high school, even if they have the right certifications on paper, because my sense is there isn't confidence that students at that level are truly ready. And so I think, you know, we're going to need to see a significant transformation in how industry in K-12 work together to really build confidence in what our students are learning in our programs and what they're prepared for at the end of our programs, such that, like in our early college STEM school, high school programs, there are opportunities for, you know, access to jobs at the end of our program. So I think that is what I would say is what really stands in the way of that sort of disruptive nature of CTE. Is I think we're going to continue to suffer from a negative stigma of being for lower performing students until we sort of get that collective buy-in from industry about what our students are prepared for at the end of these programs, and therefore sort of the rigor and quality of them.
Thank you. Thank all three of you. I think that was a really great overview of a lot of sort of CTE, the challenges. I'm glad that you mentioned those, Arthi. I was going to ask you about some of them. And the first question I was sort of thinking as you all were talking was for Tim, talking about how industry is very satisfied, employers feel very good. And I was just curious, and I think you've touched on this a little bit, is it's sort of not all rosy, I think, when it comes to career and tech ed. I don't know if maybe you would disagree, but I'd be curious as to your thoughts. I think we hear a lot at the Chamber from various, you know, pockets around the country that CTE hasn't transformed the way Arthi is trying to do it in Chicago, and it hasn't sort of become, you know, it's still your, you know, grandfather's CTE in many places, not connected to industry, not focused on rigorous academics, not, you know, with a keen eye towards student outcomes. So I think that's where maybe the transformation needs to occur, but I'd be curious as to thoughts.
I think you hit the nail on the head with, we have a wide variety of CTE throughout the country and CTE programs as a whole. So we got exceptional programs like what you find in Oklahoma. So Oklahoma's the cream of the crop. If I go down there, I have tech centers that are, you know, beyond belief, with students that are coming out of those programs with phenomenal skills. You know, the centers are extremely well funded because of the way that they have the funding mechanisms put together there. And then you got other parts of the country where they need some help, which I think is what the blueprint is all about, that the Department of Education has put together to help look at how we can further support Perkins, further support career tech ed, and provide some of that transformative nature to these programs as a whole. I think there's work to be done in several places, but I see a lot of value that really comes from the programs. Industry sees great value for having these programs in play, and when industry is involved, a lot more things happen. So I think we could use some help on the chamber side to better get industry engagement with their schools in a meaningful way.
Yeah. I think that's a challenge for industry too, and I was thinking as you were talking, Arthi, that and we're working on this a little bit through a project that we're just getting underway around sort of youth unemployment and that crisis in this country. And I think what we're trying to look at is sort of what are those intermediaries that really do a great job of connecting industry to youth. So it's not enough to just say employers need to hire more young people. Right. I mean, we've got to make it worthwhile for employers, and it's, you know, it's challenging. There's all sorts of things, and, you know, the vast majority of employers in this country are small and medium-sized businesses who don't have sort of the ability to do what needs to be done in order to cultivate these young people in their industry. So anyway, I mean, just a sort of a thought and an acknowledgement from the chamber that's something we want to try to work on, to try to stand up some of these, I think, key partners in connecting those young people to employment.
And if I could add to that, I mean, I think it's fair for industry to not want to just hire students right outside of high school. So I think I think there's probably a step of, you know, K-12 building bridge with an intermediary, and then that intermediary building bridges with industry. And I think that there's certainly in Chicago a lot more we could do on that front. But I think with our seamless pathways to city colleges, that's one way to do it. And so I think our city colleges are having more luck getting businesses bought into what their graduates have. So now as we backward map our curriculum and try to build pathways there, I think we have a little more traction. I think another great example is Year Up. So Year Up is a successful program that employers do seem pretty satisfied with students who participate, and they're right out of high school, but they go through, I think, a year or so of technical and work readiness skills training. And when employers come to Year Up, they have a pretty, high percentage guarantee that students are going to be ready. And so they're sort of an externally validating force.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, absolutely.
Yep.
David, I wanted to ask you, as you were talking about your the sort of think, know, act, go, and those skills, and you made the comment that it really is the same. What the skills and knowledge that students need are the same whether you're going to college or career, and so why do we sort of have these? It just sort of struck me as to kind of why then do we still have what appears to be sort of different paths, right? You're either on a CTE path or you're on a college path, and I feel like that's still always going to come with it, that sort of negativity.
Well, let me just I'll point out a model of where they're trying to get around this and really make it work functionally. And that in California, the UC system has always approved all of the courses that are called A through G requirements, and they're in the different academic areas. And if your high school has to send the syllabus in, and it gets reviewed by the UC Office of the President, and they do an audit to see if it can qualify to count for admission to the UC system. But recently, in the last half dozen years, they've started to work with approving CTE courses to meet UC entrance requirements. So here's an example of a place where you've got sort of the most demanding academic requirements in the nation, but now you're trying to see how can CTE courses meet those. And one of the terms that's been used, Gary Hochlander's work on linked learning has become very popular, but it's an example of, it's not quite CTE. I mean, the classes are still technical classes, but they're not they're not necessarily at the level of sort of occupational certification. They may lead that way, but they may just be more of an introduction to an occupational area or to a way of thinking. So something like robotics or informatics isn't necessarily career preparation, strictly speaking, but it creates awareness of students of how and why academic content is necessary if one is going to progress along a career pathway. So I think a lot of that additional type of instructional opportunity in courses needs to be available if this application of knowledge route is going to be acceptable to all students and certainly to all parents. I mean, that's really the heart of the problem, is that in the U.S., going back to the 1920s, the core of the high school was developed around academic skill, and in the 1890s, the Committee of 10 adopted what is essentially the college prep curriculum now. And it wasn't until the 19-teens and 20s that vocational education really came into being. So it was an add-on to the high school. Not every place around the world did it that way, but we did it historically that way. So we've always had this notion that the academic learning was legitimate and the vocational education was an add-on. And I think we've never really kind of gotten around that. So if you can think about integrating sort of concepts, like I was in public school for 20 years before I went into higher ed, and in the district where I was an assistant superintendent, we implemented a class called Principles of Technology. And students who were in what had been vocational education courses now started taking Principles of Technology. And of course, we had this battle with the science teachers at the high school about whether that could count for science. But when we were able to overcome that, now you've got students who are getting physics, chemistry, statistics, other skills in the CTE environment, and now they're stronger candidates to pursue different technical programs. When the kids in the CTE programs don't have the strong academic skills, they are dramatically limited in terms of the kind of technical careers they can pursue. So I think it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And I don't want to sort of leave the audience out, so I'll throw it open to see if anyone has any burning questions for any of my fellow panelists. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and ask another question. We've got probably 10 minutes, so I just want to make sure if you're thinking about something, go ahead and pop up. I would say I think it's important, and I think your acknowledgement, David, or your comments about you know, what is needed for college and career are very much the same in the level of skill. And I think that's something that, you know, in the work that we do at the Chamber and sort of looking at where we are in terms of academic achievement for, especially for our low-income minority students in this country. I mean, we still have a long way to go with those basic set of skills for a lot of students. So regardless of the, I mean, there's challenges in whatever path they choose, and so we have a lot of, you know, we sort of need to be mindful of that basic level of academic achievement that we all hopefully are focused on to some extent. Sir, do you want to?
Yeah, this may actually dovetail with what you were just saying. One of you a couple of minutes ago mentioned parents. I'd like the panelists to comment on the readiness of parents to accept the idea that college may not be the only way or may not be the only thing that you need to do to succeed. And I'm reminded of about a year ago in California, the state that you cited as being an example of trying to integrate at the higher levels. One of the larger districts instituted a requirement. They added one CTE course to each semester of either the senior year or the junior and senior year in high school, and the parents practically stormed the district headquarters with torches and pitchforks, saying, you know, my kid is going to go to college, get this career stuff out of here. Any comments on, and maybe from Chicago would be a good example, or any of you, as to whether that kind of bias is starting to change?
I'd love to say yes, but I think it's still a challenge. I think it's quite honestly our biggest challenge. People love AP, they love IB, they love STEM, even though STEM is really largely CTE, but they don't see CTE as rigorous or as college-bound as those things. And I think that it's shifting a little bit as we, you know, add programs like game programming or pre-engineering or pre-law, but the stigma is still there, and I think we're chipping away at it. I wouldn't say we've blown it up, but I think we're chipping away at it, and that includes, you know, outreach with students. It includes, quite frankly, educating our own counselors, even our elementary counselors, as they're advising students on which high schools to select, don't understand the transformation that's happening in CTE, and it also requires that parent engagement as well. But I actually would say that the brand and the perception, the stigma is among our biggest challenges.
I'll just piggyback on that real quickly to say, just to go back to remind you the distinction between occupation and career pathway. And what I'm suggesting is, if what we're doing is preparing students for a career pathway, you're going to get a lot more openness from a lot more parents. If it's occupational preparation, I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying that's where you're going to engender a tremendous amount of a concern by some parents at least.
And I'll close this one out. This is, by the way, I'm very glad to hear you say STEM and CTE are one and the same, because I continue to want to try to hit on that bandwagon. But the Industry Workforce Needs Council that I spoke of, one of our charters and our mission is to help address the stigma of career and technical education and uplift the value of these careers and professions that are throughout CTE. So we plan on doing this through a consumer product goods campaign. So imagine, and not that we'll use this, but imagine the front of a Wheaties box having a welder on it and showcasing the value of these professions. You know, doing that through a variety of consumer product goods, getting the retail stores on board to really help change that perception overall. That is part of our mission, and we have a number of organizations on board, and hopefully we can get that put together within the next year to start really rallying some support around this.
I had a
it's a big
major employer in South Texas tell me that they have these fantastically high-paying jobs that were sort of middle skill jobs, and they were having a really hard time filling them, not even necessarily because they couldn't find people qualified, they couldn't find people to apply, right. Because most young people were, you know, I need to go to college, and that was sort of the mentality, and they said the best advertisement they would get was when they had one of their employees drive through town with the, you know, with a nice pickup truck and the boat on the back, and, you know, it was sort of like, oh, this is what I can actually do. I don't have to necessarily go on to, so I think the stigma is certainly really important in all of this.
Yeah, and parents don't understand that.
Yeah.
So, you know, in my workforce board, we got more $80,000 welding careers that, or jobs, and we have no people that are interested in those professions. We just don't have the pipeline.
And I would just go back to our own staff don't get it, right? So we do a senior exit questionnaire of all of our graduating seniors, and we ask them, how well do you feel the adults in your school prepared you to apply for college? How well do you feel they prepared you for going into the workforce? Very low percentage. I want to say it's, you know, 40% or so will say they feel prepared to figure out how to go find a job or what other, you know, job training opportunities are there. And then like 90-some% will say they understand the college application process. So one of the things we're doing, we're working with our local workforce board. I'm actually meeting with them next week to try to figure out how can we educate our counselors, our high school counselors this fall, to understand that other elements of what other opportunities may exist after high school beyond just going into college.
A real quick question. My name is Vartan Uzunia with Bluehost. We have a lot of reports of students who are graduating from high school with a portfolio that they've created and actually applying, and some of them haven't even graduated from high school. They're actually going to colleges with portfolios as their means of assessment of competencies and being accepted even with that. I mean, do you guys see that as being a part of what you're pushing is showing competencies more, or?
Well, funny story here. I developed a proficiency-based admission system in Oregon in 1993 that was adopted by the State Board of Higher Education, where students could be admitted based on collections of evidence where they showed what they could do. So we were a little ahead of our time. We learned that. But you're seeing it come back now, but you're seeing it far more in the four-year institutions and actually at the selective end, which is kind of unfortunate. I think that students who are already pretty competent are given another chance and another option. But the idea is that you can capture some kids who may not be the world's greatest test takers, or who might have had a problem in high school and not gotten everything right. It's still a niche type of an activity. It certainly is not at all prevalent at community colleges or other environments where you'd go directly into a career pathway program. So I think we're turning the corner on that, honestly, because it's partly because it's easier now to store more complex information and to transmit it, but it's still on the horizon, I'd say.
I mean, I would say from the employer perspective, I think that's a place that a lot of people would love to see us in at some point in the future, if you could sort of collect these set of competencies or set of skills. And I think the employers have a huge role to play here to say, I'll accept that over some piece of paper that says I got a diploma at some point down the road. If you could sort of, through badges and all sorts of other things, sort of collect that, you know, portfolio, as you said, and sort of present that as a, you know, this is what I'm, you know, my demonstrated set of competencies or skills. I just think we're so far away from getting
I should mention New Hampshire and Maine have both adopted state-level systems that are going to require students to collect evidence. But once again, it doesn't apply as directly to the CTE area, and in the colleges, although they're coming on board, are still, I think that's still, as I say, on the horizon. It's still being negotiated.
And any other questions from folks? I was going to ask you to maybe touch on the sort of what you thought the most important criteria was in sort of getting the transformation that is starting to occur or is occurring in Chicago. Was it leadership? What was sort of the thing that you all needed to kind of, like you said, you started to align with industry? I mean, things that I feel like are kind of, you know, no-brainers, but it needed somebody to,
Yeah, I think it was a constellation of a few things. I think number one was our mayor and our workforce board sort of locked arms with me and CEO Duncan at the time to say this is what we need to do. We're going to work on this together. It gave a lot of validity to our programs to say we worked with the local workforce board to say these are the standards we should be teaching toward. And it not just gave us validity from an optical perspective, but also from the perspective of truly informing the content of our program. So I think it was that sort of alignment of forces politically, but also the leadership perspective to the leadership element to actually transform it. So the truth is we made a lot of changes. We made the difficult decisions of shutting down programs that weren't working, that were, there were no high standards, there was no appetite to raise the rigor, and I still get people blogging about it, you close my program, but, 5 years later, but I think, so we made those difficult decisions, and really, really just took the initiative to transform, so.
I think we have time for maybe one more question, and then we'll.
Hi, Kina Antonelli with Promethean. I know a lot of the career readiness programs are really beneficial for a lot of the at-risk populations, whether it's teen parents or single-parent households where students are required to work outside of school as well to support their families. Have you had to make any adjustments, maybe with some of the CTE delivery, whether it's through online options or after-hours education options for those students to accommodate those additional pressures that they have and responsibilities?
So I can speak to the Chicago perspective, and you guys might have different models. So I think the reality is that's a next step for us in Chicago. So right now our programs are somewhat rigid, and they're essentially 2 or 3 year majors that a student will follow throughout high school and result in a certification, college credit, et cetera. I don't think they're as flexible as they could be. So one of the things we're embarking on right now is working with our city colleges to say sort of what are 1 year certification programs that we could create that could be after school, could be online, could be other things, but provide the flexibility for someone who can't dedicate the normal school time hours in 3 years to a particular major, if you will.
Well, it's interesting that space is so full at the post-secondary level with proprietary providers, but I don't see much of it going on at the secondary level, which is an interesting kind of a question to ponder, is whether people who know how to do this pretty well already for adults could adapt it more completely for students in secondary school. I think it's perhaps an opportunity.
Well, I think you got some real showcase examples around the country, but there's certainly some lack of uniformity. I just go back to the Oklahoma examples. There's very solid structures for career pathways, inclusion in CTSOs and other or outside organizations, work-based learning experience coupled with the all leading to certification. And I think that model will catch fire, or at least I see it starting to catch fire, but it's got a ways to go yet. But there's certainly some opportunity there to replicate or capture what those folks are doing and taking it large scale.
Great. I think we're just a couple minutes over, so I want to allow my fellow panelists to say if you have anything, one last parting comment you want to make before we wrap up, or not. That's fine too.
I would just say I think I would invite you as industry to advise us on what will it take for industry to be more bought into CTE and more willing to hire at the end of our programs, because I think that's something we constantly struggle with, and we welcome your feedback on that.
The killer app here is the curriculum that the parent of the college-going student and the parent of the student who thinks they're going to go into the work world who would equally value it. So that's the people who produce that, I think, are going to have something incredibly useful and valuable.
I see a great opportunity in CTE and look forward to continuing to serve that market in the future, because I think it's going to be something that industry will really rally around. And if there's folks around these tables that want to help stand up and support Career Tech Ed as a whole, feel free to let me know, because we got a lot of great opportunities to get connected and get involved.
Join me in thanking the great panel.